Hello and welcome back to the Bedford Tigers YouTube channel and welcome to another big interview. This time we're here with Sam Richbell, probably the club's biggest legend. That's my view on it anyway. When someone says to me Bedford Tigers, the first name I think of is Sam Richbell. The second name is Rob Ashton. Before we get into your journey of how you became synonymous with the club, how are you today? How was your off season?
Yes, good. There isn't an off season. There is no season. So, yeah, I feel good. The body's still sore. I think I'm still reeling from my 25 minutes over up in North Wales. But yeah, feel good. Interesting for me to come into something with no intent on playing any rugby, really.
Yeah, you touched on that. 25 minutes in North Wales, the best 25 minutes I think you've played in a long time. When you came off the field in the first round against Medway, there was a guard of honour because you believed that was going to be it for you.
Yeah.
When you were told you were playing in that second round, what was going through your head?
Well, it's tough because I'd really put everything on that Medway game and trained, and you know, Matt made a call for the team, which was, I think, was the right call. And obviously we got through that, and it kind of was the first time in a while that I was a bit belligerent. I was like, well, I'll make the next squad. So trained harder for the weeks going into North Wales, knowing that I'd get a bit of a shot, not just because I was driving the minibus, but hopefully get some minutes on the pitch. And that experience, when you've got nothing really holding you back, well, nothing really to prove, no sort of goals ahead, and knowing that you're on a pitch with, 14 international players and a couple of our own, it was a great experience. And the boys, rugby league's a tough game. You give momentum to a team that good, then it just keeps coming. And a couple of times on the pitch where I'm running around hitting people and sort of giggling and laughing and running around, and they're like, but we're like 80 points down. It's like, I don't care. This is the greatest thing ever to happen. So
there was a time where you've considered retirement. I say a time. There has been multiple times where you've considered retirement. We spoke a little bit just before we started. This is your SCL retirement.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that? Obviously, are you still wanting to play for the development squad and help develop the younger lads that are coming through and share your knowledge with them?
I like to say that it's always been other people telling me I should retire rather than me kind of really going. But I've had operations and things, and I'm really blessed that I've kind of been able to bounce back, although slower and a little bit larger. But I wanted that Super League game, Challenge Cup game to be my last at that level. That was really a thing that was really big for me, because there are boys now that are much better than me and faster, and the squad is moving at such a rate. And I'd always made this agreement with Rob that, when my place in the squad is no longer my place, then it's the right time. And for that level, and watching the club go from strength to strength is great. So there are other things, like there's the women's team that I will hopefully be helping out with coaching, and our A grade side, that I think that will probably be where I might have a few minutes, and try and kind of navigate the next development of this team.
Yeah, we'll go on to your support of the women's team and your journey through the club as we progress through this chat. I want to go back right to the start for you. When did you first put on a pair of rugby boots and step onto a pitch?
Gosh, well, I've been playing. 1988 was the first time I put a set of rugby boots on to play mini rugby over at Wellingborough, because my dad played back in the 60s and had a knee injury, and that sort of stopped him. And then I think it was to keep my brother and I kind of out of the house on a Sunday, he'd take us to a rugby club, and then I was like, actually, I'd quite like to try that. So I started off with mini stuff and the kind of what is now the tag game, and then sort of developed from there and really fell in love with it. But I wasn't really a typical kind of union forward, because I was reasonably quick, had all right hands, and I didn't really like the walk from scrum to scrum, the ruck, the line out. It was something I loved, but it didn't really sort of satiate my need for sort of excitement with the game.
Yeah.
And I would always kind of tend to play slightly off the cuff stuff and get told off for it. But, my first ever rugby league was 97. I moved up to Leeds, and that was a conversation with my dad, because I would sort of figured out that I was reasonable at rugby, and I kind of wanted to knock on the door at Bedford, and I'd been at a couple of clubs before then, and was told by my teacher at school, who was a Bedford Blue at the time, that I'd never be a rugby player. And it kind of, partly it made me want to be, and this is why I got into teaching and things about developing youth and understanding actually words have real impact. And it gutted me at that time. And I went home and had a conversation with Dad and was like, well, that's done, And he was like, well, let's go and find, you are a rugby player, let's go find you a sport that, will accept you and how you play and things. So went up to Leeds University and found rugby league, and we were being coached by a guy called Dave Wrench at the time, who was a Wakefield stalwart, and played with a few guys that had gone on. A guy called Matty Blamar, who had hundreds of games for Wakefield as well. He was in my sort of student team, and within a few months, I was doing representative students and sort of on the radar of a couple of clubs. And although that never really progressed the way that I suppose you would envisage the staircase to go, it taught me that rugby league was my absolute love. And then when I moved back here, and there was a rugby league team, and I remember sitting at home at my parents' house not far from here, and realising that Bedford had a rugby league team, and I sent my playing CV to a guy called Andy Buckley, who was a real influence on the club, saying, this is my playing CV, this is what I've done, my representative stuff, some of my club stuff, and was like, would I be able to come on and sort of trial? And obviously Andy read it and took his time, so within 30 seconds I got a reply. And he was like, yeah, come on, this we go. And I turned up, and it was grassroots. It wasn't really even rugby league. It was a bunch of union boys that were having a little foray into it, because there was an Australian guy that was part of the coaching setup, and and I've been here ever since, and I've watched it just go to where we are now, which is that's a dream for me.
And you joined in 2004, right at the start?
Yeah, 2004.
Yeah, so we're coming to 22 years. 22 years ago. We can't do all the fact checking and the stats and the games because some of the data is missing. But you will have played for the first team at every level. Yeah. You will have played over 250 games, we reckon, for this club.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. For any person at any level, at any club, that is a lot. Why did you stick around? Why did you not feel like there was a next step for you? Like you said, you had the representative stuff, the higher level uni, and you had the potential to play at other clubs, and you've played England amateurs and Lionhearts. Was there never the option to go and play elsewhere, or was there and you chose to stay?
It was never really a want. The thing was, and again, it's another conversation with Dad, the only thing to feel that I'd made it as a rugby player, I wanted somebody to want my name and maybe to be paid a little bit of money to be played. And weirdly, I was at Batley for a short time, and in literally my first sort of couple of sessions there, we were signing balls. And I was like, well, that's that bit ticked off. Yeah. That's that done. And throughout some of my union career, unofficially, obviously, we got paid a little bit of money. And that was it. Like, I never felt the need to or the want to do the full professional grind. It was never something. And then I became part of a club that was just, there was heart and there was potential, and it was a real family, and it was a real family. It is a real family. And, it's given me lifelong friends. I've played pretty much with every player that's come through this club. And, we've had great times at like Eastern level in the early 2000s. We were just unstoppable, going and playing in playoffs and playing down against Plymouth or Bristol in games that, what at the time was, a club that had nothing. It was just a bunch of boys that did it. And we played great stuff. And it would always drag me back. And that's, I suppose, the retirement thing a little bit as well, is that I always felt there was something else left to give the club. Yeah. And I said to Rob, because obviously Rob and I have been around almost as long as each other. And he made a comment to me a couple of weeks ago that there was a season that I was out because I had an operation, and then I made it very clear to him there was a season that he didn't get picked. So, it kind of averaged itself out. But, going back to sort of the caps and things, I hadn't realised it was that many.
Yeah.
I knew we kept count up to about 100 games. And the thing is, at the time, that my try ratio to game ratio was pretty much 1-to-1.
Yeah.
And there was always a fight with a guy called Richard Sinclair, who I played my first ever Tigers game with away at St Albans, and with some of our Australian sort of counterparts as well. And just, this club has always had something for me. And it will do, whether I'm on the pitch, whether I'm off the pitch, but it will always have something.
Yeah. And that's wonderful to hear. You love this club loves you, and you had that development with this club. When you first joined, when Andy Buckley said, "Yeah, come along," did you expect it would last this long? Did you see the vision, or did you just kind of say, because it was you were enjoying yourself? Was it I'm going to play here as long as I'm enjoying myself, or was it? What was that to you? What did you see the future was?
I think because my league experience had come, and my last few games up in Leeds, I played for a team called Queens, who were known as being quite abrasive, quite a rough kind of team, and played in a few real sort of Yorkshire games that were, there was like, they used to do the Yorkshire Evening Post Floodlit Cup evening games, and I played in a few of those, and that was real rugby league, and I was playing with proper salt of the earth northerners, and I was the relatively well spoken, although I had slightly twang of an accent by then, and it still comes out, and the kids at school pull me up on it every now and then, that it's not path, it's par. Then getting to play with boys that rugby league was their thing and from their roots, and when I came here, I felt that I could actually start to deliver a little bit of North down here, and we were having the kind of interest from players who'd never done it, and then Union completely shifted, and all the stuff we were doing in League became really pertinent within the Union game, and we were watching boys that were all right Union players. They'd come and play League for us for a season, then they'd go and be twice as good Union players because they'd carry better, they'd know the offloads, everyone had hands, and I thought it was a great place just to kind of be. Yeah. And that's why I've said now been here 22, 23 years.
You touched on getting into teaching and bringing North into South. We spoke last episode to Josh Hudson. That he's one of the boys that joined your school as a 15, 16-year-old. He said it was you that got him into this club.
Yeah.
Why Josh? Why mention it to Josh? What was it about Josh that you saw and said rugby league's for him?
Well, he always had something. Josh was a supreme athlete, but it wasn't a rugby player. He was. Well, I met him when he was 12, and he came to the school that I taught at the time, which no longer exists, and he was obviously being channeled by his mum and dad into a way that was really good for him. Yeah. Because I think Josh, realistically, and he'll probably admit it himself, could have become a statistic. Because, and I know that Josh is very, very proud of his Jamaican heritage, and we're incredibly proud of him, but there were times that there were influences from other areas of the town that we live in that might not have been very positive for him. Now, he was put into Rushmore, the private school at the time, and he didn't really know how to handle that because he was surrounded by white British middle class people. Yeah. And rugby wasn't, especially rugby league wasn't, but rugby wasn't really a huge thing at that school. But Lee Walker, a former player, and we were PE staff at that school, and we saw a real thing within Josh. And the thing that he thrived on was the relationship. Yeah. And he calls me Dad now. He called me Dad when Dad was around, and that's the thing, is that his dad was absolutely fine with it. Yeah. And it was a real family thing, and he's always been someone that I've held very close to my heart and wanted to succeed. And watching him in the last 3 or 4 years go from the winger that we'd always have to control because he would be fighting. Yeah. He would throw down, and now to understand that his place not only in our team but kind of within the rugby league world, is he's going to be a role model.
Yeah.
You know, for him to play against Jamaica, and I remember for Jamaica. Sorry, I remember the first conversations that we had, and it was a pipe dream.
Yeah.
It was pie in the sky. You know, and then he kind of almost made it, and then he did make it. And as a guy that's watched him go from this gymnastic-y 12-year-old with a real chip on his shoulder who didn't like to be told what to do and didn't really trust anyone other than mum and dad, to be such a loving, great young man who we are incredibly proud of. It's a real heartwarming thing for me, and I'm just glad that I got to be a part of his journey.
Yeah, and I think he's very proud of that as well. Like you've both said, he calls you dad.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned your dad.
Yeah.
I touched on it with Josh. What did your parents mean to you? How did they influence you growing up, and how did they inspire you as a teenager and a young adult who wanted that change when, like you said, your dad was like, let's find a sport for you? How did your parents mold you into the man you are?
The one thing that my brother and I, and we always, and our family always talk about, is the one thing I never worried about was love.
Yeah.
Like I am, and always was, so incredibly loved by my parents, and opportunities were given to us partly because of that love. So I was really lucky enough to go to private school, and not because, you know, my parents had any sort of delusions of, you know, aristocracy or anything like that. More actually because I was probably a naughty boy, and it was a good channel, and certain things within that schooling system taught me, you know, a bit of discipline, hard work, and things like that. But also it taught me kind of the person that I didn't want to be as well. Yeah. You know, allowed me to keep this well-rounded thing, and like, we weren't wealthy people, and Dad, you know, sort of sold pensions to be able to put us through school and those opportunities, and that was because of love. Yeah. You know, and he passed away 2018, so 8 years this year. But before the day that he actually died, unfortunately he had a heart attack on the way back from a meeting in Oni. But I'd seen him that day, and the last thing I got to say to my dad was, I love you, I'll see you later. Yeah. And that's a real thing for me, and my kind of grief on that, and I know that you probably hear in my voice that it gets a bit wobbly, but
that's okay.
It's horrible when you lose a parent. Now, my mum always says to me, we were so lucky to have that person for that amount of time. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that the way I feel about people and my family and my friends and things like that is that we're really lucky to get any time with people we care about. Yeah. So I got nearly 40 years with my dad, and every single moment of that was full of love and encouragement. And he always used to say, he went, look, it will be what it will be. You know, try and be the best version of yourself. And you can only work with what you got. Yeah. And that was his big thing. It was, you can only work with what you got. And we, as a family, we have these little purple bands on, which is, it says WWDD, so what would Dad do? So if I've ever got a real issue, I'll have a chat with him and sort of, and it worked out. And he's always like, certain little nuggets that always came to me, but, you know, you can only work with what you got. And I think a lot of the time people don't really realise what they've got. Yeah. And I know that I've got, or I've had, lots. And this whole Bedford Tigers thing, the whole reason why I'm on the journey with it is because you can only work with what you got. And now we've gone from not having a lot to actually we've got loads.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You mentioned family.
Yeah.
You've mentioned your brother.
Yeah.
Ollie's amazing. I love Ollie. For those of people that don't know Ollie, what is he like as a brother? Like outside of the Ollie that everyone knows, what's he like?
He's an absolute tit. That's what he he makes jokes to me all the time about. So Ollie's partially sighted. He's registered disabled. He'll hate me saying this, but it's something that's never held him back. My parents were told that he'd never read, never write, never kick a football. Yeah. And actually, he's a massive role model for me because he is a lawyer. He's got his own practice. It's called the DRP, if anyone's interested. It's about dispute avoidance, which, because again, Dad was a mediator, so they work together. And he is caustically funny, inappropriate in many ways, so educated and so like clever, but he's so personable. And I remember when I sort of was first here, and we'd kind of go out together, and people kind of know me in rugby fraternities, and he'd be, "Oh, you're Sam's brother." And in the last sort of 5 years, he found the gym and got hot, which is disappointing. But now it's like, "Oh, you're Ollie Richbell's brother," and I love that. I mean, obviously, there's a part of me where it smarts a little bit, but he is, and he's an inspiration. And you know, if ever there's sort of been things kind of thrown at you, and I know you touched on it with Josh about like racial abuse and things like that, but you know, Ollie's disabled. He's dealt with all this prejudice, you know, on a physical disability, but he's still, you know, he still sees the world through, you know, lovely sunny eyes. I mean, that's also a bit of a bad joke, isn't it? Because he's partially sighted. But for a guy who you say is registered as a blind, when he'll play golf and he'll knock a ball 250 yards down the fairway, and was like, "Did you see that?" I was like, "I know you saw it as well." So, you know, let's not do that. And he's known in our golf group as the bandito, because you know he'll be like, "Oh, who said that?" And they got a kind face, and then cream a ball down the middle. And he's been a part of my rugby journey, and he's been to most games, and you know, he's always the voice that I've heard the loudest on the sidelines. And it's just, you know, I'm very, very lucky to have who I have in my life.
Yeah. We're going to touch on the rugby side of things.
Yes, please do.
Now, as you said, 22 years of Tiger.
Yeah.
Over 250 games. Probably over 200 tries, if we really went back.
It's not been many the last few years, but yeah, not maybe.
What was it like in the mid-teens, 2015, treble winning year? Yeah. What's the last 10 years been like for you? Because, like you said, people have told you that enough is enough.
Yeah.
You're saying, no, enough is enough. How has it been dealing with that?
Well, my first 35 was when I was first sort of toying with retirement, and that was because of various operations, and I didn't know whether I'd, you know, be able to bounce back or not. And I think it's the old Rocky kind of adage where, you know, the Rocky Balboa film where he was too old to really fight, but he still had enough left in the locker.
Yeah.
And I think I've just been clearing the locker out for the last 10 years really, and seeing if you could. And when the boys made sort of transition up to the level we are to SCL now, it was a real kind of, could I still?
Yeah.
And I know I could still, and now I'm like, well, you don't have to. And my life has sort of shifted a little bit of going, you know, I've really enjoyed it. I don't feel I have anything to prove. You know, if I can help in any way I can. And I'm not saying it's not the last time I shouldn't have pair of boots on, but, you know, and this is direct to Matt, I've not got another pre-season in me. So, you know, let's close that door.
Nice. Before we move on, it's all good.
My iPhone storage is full, but it will pick up from that. So we'll just continue.
You said you want to help in any way you can.
Yeah.
You've been a captain of this club. You've been a coach of this club at the men's level. You've also helped coach a women's team alongside Phil Walker and Rob Ashton and a couple of other people. When the women's section of this club set up, you stepped forward pretty much straight away.
Yeah.
What was it about wanting to develop the women's side rather than, say, an under-18s or an under side? Why did that stick out to you? Why was it the women's team?
I think partly because I'm a teacher and was a PE teacher for a significant amount of my career, you watch what girls are offered as sport. And I've been really lucky to work in some incredible PE departments with some incredible women as well. And if there's an opportunity for a springboard for someone, then we should offer it. And regardless of whether, you know, we do disability stuff, but whether it's gender disability, you know, able-bodied, youth, whatever, we have a kind of a right and a commitment to actually deliver something which is for the future. And when we got that opportunity for Super League, for Women's Rugby League, it was a real thing to go, actually I can make a real impact on some of these young women's playing career. Because they never really believed that they were viable. Now if we look at people that, you know, Storm Cobain obviously flying from strength to strength, Chloe Alcorn, she's a lot younger than me, but she feels she shouldn't be doing it seasons now. But these are women who have come in, picked up a new game, and absolutely flown with it. And it's a wonderful thing, and I think that to be able to offer young women a pathway that is a viable pathway, because we've got proven viability through that it's an opportunity they don't know about. So shout about it, and it's kind of what we're doing. And I think within schools, I'm already looking at some of the girls that I've coached through union throughout our school, and gone, actually, a couple of years' time, we need to keep an eye on this. This is where we need to be. And it could be a really viable opportunity. There could be careers that come out of girls in Bedford that become Super League players, become international players. But until they know about it, until people shout about it, it's never going to happen.
I've got 2 more questions for you.
Yeah.
What is your highest high as a Bedford Tiger?
That's a really tough one, because there's so many of them. Like winning multiple kind of East Regions or Cups or things like that with mates, that's huge.
Why don't we go with one team one?
Yeah.
And then one personal individual one? If that helps.
Okay. Well, my individual one, I actually think we go way back, and we played Plymouth in national playoffs down in Bristol. So we were playing Plymouth, and they had a guy called Gavin Boak who was 6 foot. I haven't thought about that name for a long time. He was 6'6". He was carnage for that league. And I remember picking him and going, right, that's going to be the player that I'm going to stop for this game. And he was notoriously scoring 3 tries a game, like 3 people, things like that. And the whole game I just was on top of him, and we were tackling. We had a conversation mid-game, and he was like, your shoulder's going to get tired from tackling me. I was like, not before your engine does. And we won the game. He scored 1 try. He also got a yellow card because he got really frustrated. And that was my thing that I was kind of like, my game was nothing during that. I was just a tackler, really. And so that was completely different to my normal kind of game of sort of running and offload and things like that. But I felt that my performance on that day was the reason why we then progressed through that game. And it was such an amazing moment. I think about it now. So yeah, that was probably, it's a weird one because it didn't carry a trophy.
Yeah.
That was just a game.
But it's something that stands out.
Yeah, and I think team one, and it's really odd because I know that a lot of the boys don't hold the game. They hold the game in high regard, but not the result. Was, second round challenge cup. As a club to never have done it, to don't go through that and be a part of it, and I know I'm old, and the boys know I'm old, but I didn't feel that on that day I was getting the sympathy level. But to be a part of the second round challenge cup when you're 45, that hurts. And come off the pitch, and since that, everybody I've spoken to about that game, they were like, they were great minutes. And I did a couple of things that were real highlights for me. And that was also the reason why we could kind of put the lid on it.
Final question.
Yeah.
What's next?
I'm not going to use it time. It's a life adjustment, I think. It's the first time that I've not been a part of a union or a league club from a playing point of view. Kind of going gracefully into my mid-40s, but still being a part of something. And I do also know that there'll probably be a London game away at some point that we might need a middle. So we'll see, but just enjoy what I've kind of been a part of, and get to see it from the other side of the road.
Thank you very much for joining me. That was the big interview. Thank you very much again to Brewpoint for allowing us to film. We'll see you next time.
Awesome.